Hello and welcome to the Real-Time Fantasy Sports Show. I'm Jeff Power, senior writer with Real-Time Fantasy Sports. I'm joined again by Logan Glaser, contributing writer here at Real-Time Fantasy Sports. Logan, thanks for joining me on the show today. Really looking forward to talking to you.
Absolutely. Excited to break down. And we're going to be breaking down players to avoid in this NFL fantasy week too. So lots to talk about with that.
Yeah, each week we're going to do like a different topic. Last week we did under the radar players. This week we're going to do players to avoid, guys we're fading. So we're going to look at each game every week during the season, kind of pick a different topic, move it around a little bit to give you guys different viewpoints throughout the year. So this week we're going to do players to avoid, guys we're fading. Before we get to that, though, let's talk briefly about week one. What are your overall thoughts? Anything stand out to you at all, especially fantasy-wise?
Well, for like NFL wise, there are a couple of very sloppy games that we definitely saw. Definitely, you could tell some players that didn't have that preseason kind of experience, such as Joe Burrow, who didn't play in the preseason game after he got hurt. So there was definitely some rust to kind of shake off with that. And you kind of saw that in fantasy scores. Defenses exploded, as we mentioned in our waiver wire video. Dallas Cowboys defense. They won a lot of matchups for people, and you usually don't see that out of a defense. And it was kind of the opposite with quarterbacks, where you had several different quarterbacks that had under 5 that were in starting lineups. So, scores were all over the place in fantasy week one.
Yeah, tight ends were terrible too. You're right, though. You have to wonder if the lack of preseason, that a lot of people don't want to play their preseason, their players in preseason anymore, and they also cut down the games. They bargained that a couple years ago, so there's less preseason games, less starters playing. Could lead to more sloppy play early in the year.
Yeah,
But
and you would think that it's going to be corrected in the next week or two. I mean,
yeah,
from that Bengals offense, you're not going to get a 0 from Higgins again. Burrow's not going to be under 4, I don't think, anymore for the rest of the season. For Atlanta, Jake London had a 0. Dallas Goedert had a 0 for Philadelphia. You're not expecting that any weeks for the rest of the year with them.
yeah, definitely, I agree. And as we have said in the past, more than happy to answer questions on here. So if you have any, we already have one. We've been on the show less than 3 minutes. I already have a question up there. So we're happy to answer them throughout the show. We'll get to this one right away since it's up already. This user lost Rodgers, waited to pick a QB. They have Carr and just picked up Purdy. Thoughts on who to start, I guess, for this week and maybe going forward as well. Who do you like, Carr or Purdy?
For this week, I like Purdy. I think it all is going to depend on matchups, but we saw from last week how explosive that 49ers offense is, and they got a favorable matchup against the Rams. I think that's going to be a high-scoring game. It's on turf, so I definitely think that's going to be a much higher-scoring game than Saints against Panthers with that.
I like Purdy as well, and I feel like the fantasy community slept on this guy. He has multiple scores, 7 straight regular season games now, plays in one of the best offenses in football, 2 great receivers, a great tight end, great running back, great offensive line. I definitely think he's going to be a solid starter the rest of the year. Good low-end number one, producing very consistent numbers throughout the year. So I
Yeah, and
like
if he
Purdy.
does just a dump off pass to like Christian McCaffrey and he takes it all away, I mean, you're getting points for a 60-yard touchdown there, and that's very possible with that offense, especially with Ayuk and Debo and lots of different ways for Purdy can.
I agree, and I think a lot of people are probably facing a similar dilemma replacing Rodgers this week. Unfortunate injury, but it's fantasy football. So let's get to these games now. Let's start getting through them. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate at all to put them in the chat. We love to hear from everybody watching out there. And you can also hit us up on Twitter if you like, if you're rewatching this later on. So first game on the slate Thursday night. That's tonight if you're watching here live. Minnesota at Philadelphia. Over-under is 49.5. Eagles -6.5. Who do you like in this game team-wise, and then what player are you fading?
Yeah, team-wise, it's hard to go against Philadelphia at home, especially with how dominant they've been. But they are missing a couple of injuries on their cornerbacks with that. So I do like Philadelphia to win this game, but I would select Minnesota to cover. I think the 6 spread, I think they keep it within the 6 points with that. So I expecting them to cover that, but Philadelphia takes the win. I also do like the over on this matchup. I think it's going to be a much higher scoring game. I think we're going to be in the 50s tonight with that. So I'm rostering a lot of players from tonight.
What about your fade? Who you fading?
Fade, I'm going to also go with Dallas Goedert, who we kind of just talked about with the 0. It's just concerning for me about his week 1 performance with that. So that's definitely a guy. If I have another option, such as maybe like a Hawkinson or Kyle Pitts or even Evan Ingram, I might be playing Evan Ingram over Dallas Goedert tonight.
So I agree with you. I think it is going to be the over, and I like the Eagles to not cover in this matchup. I think the Vikings will play a better game this week, and I'm going with the Vikings to cover and the over. And I'm kind of scared of Alexander Madison. He topped double-digit fantasy points last week, but his numbers were really bad outside of his touchdown. He had 11 carries for just 34 yards, 3 catches for just 10 yards. I think Ty Chandler could be getting more work sooner than later. And the Eagles also were 10th against the run after the first week of the season. So I'm kind of fading Madison this one. Don't really like him. All right, next game on the slate is Packers at the Falcons. Over under 40.5. Falcons are actually a home dog +1 here. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a very good game again. I thought the Bears were going to be all over Green Bay. I think a lot's going to come down to Aaron Jones' injury if he's healthy enough to play for Green Bay, because I think he really makes that offense work. It makes the other teams respect that running game. I don't think A.J. Dillon does as well of a job as Aaron Jones in that backfield. I think he's still a fine backup replacement, but I think Aaron Jones is what keeps that offense going, especially with Jordan Love at QB now. So a lot's going to come down to his health on this game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I kind of like the under here. I think it'll be a low-scoring game, and both teams are going to run the ball a lot. Even if Jones doesn't play, I think Dillon gets a heavy workload. I think the Packers are going to win the game as well, though. I don't totally trust this Falcons team, especially the offense. And a guy I'm fading is Drake London. I think they're going to try to get him involved after last week, but still, just one target. And you hear Arthur Smith say, "Oh, it's not fantasy. I don't care about your fantasy teams. That Drake London didn't get a catch." I think that's not a great answer in my opinion. This is your number one receiver on your team. You got him one target. That's not going to cut it for any offense, in my opinion. They have to get London involved. They have to be more diverse offensively, in my opinion. Get Pitts involved too. I don't know if you saw the video, but they had a video up on a lot of the Twitter or X feeds, whatever you want to call it, where Kyle Pitts was just running free all over the place last week. Didn't get any touches hardly either. So I worry about Desmond Ridder in that offense running the show. So I'm fading Drake London in this one. All right, next game, Logan, Raiders at the Bills. So that one is 47 for the over under. Bills favored 8.5. A big line for that one. So what do you think about the game and then your fade as well?
Yeah, I'm going to be leaning towards the Bills on this game. I think Josh Allen's going to be coming out mad. He even took blame for that loss against the Jets, and it's that second half of that game, he just struggled mightily. I think he had 4 turnovers with that in that second half, and usually you don't see that out of Josh Allen, but I'm going to be fading Gabriel Davis in this matchup. I do think the Bills are going to win. And I do expect them to win by more than 8.5. Which is kind of why I'm fading Gabriel Davis, because I think they're going to have a huge lead and they're just going to be running the ball in the fourth quarter to kind of wear down that time. So Gabriel Davis only had 2 receptions for 32 yards in week 1. So I'm going to be fading.
You have my fade too, Logan. I have Gabriel Davis as my fade. Same reasons you mentioned. Plus Dalton Kincaid. That's the other one for me. Big part of that offense last week. He got more targets than Davis as well. I think he's going to be the second target in that offense after Stephon Diggs. And I think Gabriel Davis is going to be too boom or bust for me to trust on a weekly basis most weeks, unless he has just a fabulous matchup. So I do not like him. And I think you're right too. I think it's a Bills revenge game. Josh Allen comes out, posts huge numbers in this matchup at home. I think they win. I think they cover as well. So Bills win big. We both say that in this matchup against
Yep,
the
we'll
Raiders.
see. When we both agree on something, usually it goes the opposite way. So
You're right. I won't say Irv Smith's a fade though. So
yeah, perfect.
all right, Ravens at Bengals. That's the next game. Speaking of Irv Smith, Ravens, Bengals -3.5 for the Bengals. So they're favored at home, 46.5 for the over/under. Bengals were terrible last week. They're at home this week, play the Ravens. This is a tough one for me. What's your thoughts on this game and then your fade as well?
Yeah, I think spread wise, it's a fair line of 3.5. I think that makes it very difficult if you're betting on this game. I think Dobbins' injury is a huge impact on Baltimore more than people are talking about. Because I mean, when he's healthy, he looks great, and he really makes that offense go. Player I'm going to be avoiding is the entire Ravens backfield. I think it's just going to be a running back by committee approach. So I'm not going to be plugging in Justice Hill or Gus Edwards in my lineups. Edwards had 8 carries, Hill had 8, and then also they're going to talk about bringing up Melvin Gordon now. And Gordon can very easily get that goal line work. So especially with Lamar as well, who can easily rush that in inside the 5. So I'm going to be avoiding the entire backfield this
I
week.
agree with that. I do not like the Ravens backfield. I do think the Bengals are going to win this game, though, just because, as you mentioned, Dobbins is a big loss, and Bengals are at home, played awful last week, kind of like the Bengals. I still think they're a really, really good team. You can't just totally dismiss them after 1 week of action. So I still think they're one of the contenders for the AFC title. I like them to win, cover at home as well. And I don't like Odell Beckham with the Ravens, especially after last week. Caught just 2 passes for 37 yards on 3 targets. He was on the field a lot, but he struggled to get open, rack up the targets as well. It was Zay Flowers. He got most of the work. Bengals also allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points to receivers in week 1. So I'm avoiding Beckham for now. Next game, Seahawks at the Lions. 47 for the over-under. Lions are favored in this one, 4.5. Seahawks played a terrible game last week against the Rams. What do you see happening here? Who are you avoiding?
I basically want everyone possible in this game. I think it's going to be a shootout. I think both of these teams have good offenses and don't have the best defenses. So I think it's going to be a shootout. So if I'm betting this game, I'm definitely doing that over 47. I think that was a really good bet on this game. If I had to choose a player to avoid, even though I want everyone in this game, I would be choosing Tyler Lockett. I think Seattle just has too many different options on offense. We kind of talked about this before, but with Metcalf, JSN actually out targeted Lockett in that first week, and then also you got Kenneth Walker who also out targeted Lockett in that first week. So there's just too many different options to go around in that Seattle offense. I do think this is going to be a very high scoring game though. So definitely, if you have someone in this game, get them in your lineup.
Lockett's a little banged up as well. It's another thing to keep an
For
eye
sure.
on. I agree with you. I think it's going to go the over here. And I think the only reason that line isn't higher is because the Seahawks offense didn't play very well last week. I like the Lions to cover too. I think they're coming off that big win. I don't think they're going to have a letdown. They had some time to prepare having that Thursday night game last week. And I'm avoiding Geno Smith in this one. I know I agree with you. I think it's going to be a high scoring game, but I worry a little bit about him last week. I thought last week was a good matchup, and he threw for just 112 yards against the Rams.
Wow.
I mean, their secondary is not the best, but the Seahawks line had trouble protecting them. Now he goes on the road against a Lions team that just beat the Chiefs. So if you have Smith, you're probably using a platoon option anyway. So that worries me. I'm going with the other guy until Smith gets it going. All right, Colts at Texans. That's the next game. Not too exciting of a matchup here. 39.5 for the over-under. Texans are +1, so they are actually not even favored at home against the Colts. What do you see happening here? Who do you not like
Yeah, I think this
as
is going to
well?
be a tight game as well. We got both rookie quarterbacks in this game. You got CJ Stroud versus Anthony Richardson. Richardson really impressed me week 1. He kept that in that game, and I actually thought they were going to end up beating Jacksonville. Jacksonville took the lead late in the fourth quarter with that. I do think this is going to be as I mentioned, tight game, but I do lean towards Houston just a little bit, just because that home factor with it. It kind of looked like Richardson was a little bit banged up at the end of that game, as well as Gardner Minshew came in with the game on the line. But it does look like Richardson will play. A player I'm going to be avoiding is Deion Jackson. He just looked terrible last week. He had 13 carries and only had 14 total yards, 1.1 carry per yard. So,
Yep, I agree with you with that call. Deion Jackson, my guy to avoid as well. I like the Texans to win at home also. I just think the home factor pushes them over the edge. That defense actually looked pretty good last week also, which was encouraging there. So I think they win at home. I might say the over, though, for 39.5 is really low. And like I said, I do not like Deion Jackson. He played 71% of the snaps, but like you said, terrible. Lost 2 fumbles as well. Don't forget about that. Now Zach Moss returns this week. I think Moss is going to quickly emerge as a starter. So if you have Deion Jackson, I would have enjoyed your time with him in the lineup because it's not going to
yep,
be much longer.
you got a whole point or two
Yeah,
with him.
exactly. I think he's done. All right, next game, Chiefs at Jags. This should be a really good game. I'm looking forward to this one. Chiefs starting off with some tough matchups here to start their season. So now they go on the road against Jacksonville. Huge line, 51 for the over-under. Jags are actually a home dog here, plus 3.5 as well. What do you see happening? The Chiefs going to rebound? Do you not like playing
Yeah,
anybody
this
in
is
this
kind of
game?
a rematch from last year's playoffs with them facing off each other. So I think Jacksonville is going to come in upset, but also Kansas City is going to come up upset after that week one loss. So I do think it's going to be a close game, but I would put my money on the Chiefs to win this game. I think there's just too much talent there in Patrick Mahomes, and if the wide receivers just catch balls thrown right at them, then they'll be fine. That's a big if. But Travis Kelsey does look like he's going to return, and he's going to be that focal point of the offense, going to be that safety net for Patrick Mahomes and kind of ease coverage off of other players. So if I had to select someone, I'm going with Kansas City on that.
So you going to fade anybody in this one, or do you like everybody?
Fade, I do think it's going to be a high scoring game as the total suggests at 51, but guy I'm going to be fading would be Zay Jones. Um, he had a good week one. He had 5 receptions, 55 yards, and a touchdown. Calvin Ridley is that clear number one option in that wide receiver core. As we saw week one, he had a dominant week one. But I think Ingram, Christian Kirk, and Zay Jones are all kind of in there for that wide receiver 2 through 4. Ingram's a tight end, but he gets lots of targets with that. But Christian Kirk only had 1 reception last week, and I think that's going to change this week. I don't see him getting shut out like that again.
Yeah, I agree. I do think Kirk will be more involved, and a lot of people are jumping ship already. And I'm telling them, stay on the ship. Don't jump ship yet because he's still a really good player and going to be
For
involved.
sure.
I think the Jags actually cover that 3.5. I think it might be a
Yeah.
3-point game. I think the Chiefs win though, but they're going to cover. And man, that over under is really high. So I may say the under here just because it's so high. I do think it'll be a high scoring game, but that's what I'll go with. And the only guy I'm kind of scared of in this game is Isaiah Pacheco, just because the way it plays out in Kansas City every week. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire started that game last week. No one saw that coming. Everybody said Pacheco was the guy going to end up playing the most, but it was Helaire. And Pacheco did end up getting more snaps, but even with that said, he didn't reach double-digit fantasy points. Jags also allowed the second fewest fantasy points to running backs in just 65 yards in week one. So I might just avoid that backfield for now. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. Let's hit this other question on here. Someone asked Addison or Michael Thomas this week. One last question for him. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I am gonna go with Addison. I think it's a tight, it's a toss-up, but I do think this game tonight is gonna be a lot higher scoring. And Addison kind of showed that wide receiver 2 role in Minnesota overtaking Osborne. It kind of was debated between who's going to be that wide receiver 2 role for this year, especially coming in as a rookie. But Addison looked good in week one. He had that long touchdown as well. So I'm going to go with Addison against a banged up secondary for Philadelphia.
I agree with you. I say Addison here, and you're going to hear why a little later because this other player might be on my fade list. So I'll give you a little sneak peek for that one. So I'm going Addison. All right, next game, Logan. Bears at the Bucks. 0-1 Bears at the Buccaneers. 1-0 surprised me winning on the road last week. The line for that game right now, Bears and Bucks, is 41 for the over/under, -2.5 for the Bucks. So they're favored, low-scoring game. What's your thoughts on the game, and who are you avoiding?
Yeah, I thought these teams would have flip-flop records with what they had now. I thought Bears were going to win week one and Tampa would lose at Minnesota, but Tampa pulled off the upset and Chicago lost that game that they were favored. But the game-wise, I think it's going to be an even matchup. The spread 2.5. I would probably go towards Chicago just a little bit, but I'm not overly going to bet
A
this
game
game.
you're not going to bet on
I
for
don't
the
have
most part,
a
right?
good feel of this. I think both these teams still have a lot of question marks that we don't know
Yeah.
about. A guy that I'm going to be avoiding, though, is Khalil Herbert. I think Chicago kind of more showed a running back by committee approach in week one. Herbert had 9, Johnson had 5, Foreman had 5, and then Fields has 9 as well. So it just doesn't – I don't love going with that running back by committee approach for having them on my fantasy team. Johnson showed a lot. I know it was like at the end of garbage time and everything, but he showed a lot of potential right there. So I would expect him to get rewarded a little bit more with how he performed.
I agree with that. I think Johnson's going to emerge as the starter at some point in that offense. For the game, this is a tough one for me. Bucks really surprised me. They're at home, so I'm going to go with them. I think they'll cover. I might go with the over too. I think the offenses will get going a little bit, especially Chicago, but I'm like you. I don't want any Bears running back in this matchup. Here's the breakdown. Johnson, 39% of the snaps. Herbert, 36%. Foreman, 28%. Bucks also allowed just 41 rushing yards last week. I'm passing on all these guys. I need somebody to emerge and somebody I can trust. So I don't want any part of that backfield right now. All right, next game, Chargers at the Titans. I think this could be a good game as well. Chargers scored a ton of points last week in defeat. 45.5 for the over-under and +3 for the Titans. So the Chargers are favored here. What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think this is going to be another really close game, but I think if I had to choose, I would go Tennessee. I think a lot of people are going to be on the Chargers with that -3, but I'm going to go with Tennessee this week. I think the Chargers defense just looked terrible last week against Miami and allowed 36 points, I believe it was, with that. But the guy I'm going to be avoiding is going to be Treylon Burks, even though it's on Tennessee, because DeAndre Hopkins just dominated Tannehill's attention last week with that game. He had 13 targets. Treylon Burks only had 3 targets, and he was ranked 4th or 5th in target shares between that. He had 2 receptions for 18 yards. So that's a very concerning for me to be going with Burks in that.
I think I'm going with Tennessee here too as well. It just Vrabel's a really good coach, keeps that team in games. They're at home. I'd go with the under as well. I do not like. I think some people might give him some play because he played so much, and that's Tyjae Spears. So I'm still avoiding him right now. He actually played more snaps than Henry last week, if you can believe that.
Well, that
54% of the snaps to 48% for Henry. But still, Spears scored just 3.8 fantasy points. So he is not a viable option just yet, despite all the work that he got. He just didn't get the touches. So don't get drawn into using him just yet, in my opinion. It's still Henry's backfield. And if they get a lead, he'll run even more. All right, next game, Giants at the Cardinals. Cardinals kind of surprised me last week, lost, but they kept that game close. Giants were awful. Over-unders 39.5. And the Giants are actually favored by 5.5 points here. What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, both teams don't look great to start this year. I guess you could say Cardinals surprised you by being in the game closer than what we kind of
Yeah.
expected to be. But I still think I'm going to go with the Giants in this game, even though they look terrible. I think they're going to be mad. They're going to be coming out upset. And Cardinals, they're fine with losing. I mean, the players probably aren't, but their owners are, and they're kind of expecting to have that #1 overall pick. A player I'm going to be avoiding is Marquise Brown. Joshua Dobbs just doesn't look great. I don't want any part of any wide receivers with him throwing the ball. He only had 3 receptions for 28 yards, and Ertz dominated Dobbs' attention last week. He had 10 targets, which was very surprising.
Definitely, yeah. He's coming off a major injury, and he was kind of iffy to even play. I agree with you. I'm going with the Giants to win here. I think they're going to come out angry. They're going to cover that. I'm going to go with the over 2. And I'm avoiding any Giants receiver right now. There was not one receiver on the roster played more than 67% of the snaps last week. So all sorts of guys getting playing time. I'm just avoiding this mess until someone else emerges. Next game, 49ers at Rams. A little more interesting after the Rams kind of surprised me last week and won. 49ers looked absolutely tremendous, though. Over under on this is 44.5. The Rams are actually +8.5. So the 49ers are still big favorites despite being on the road. You think they pull it out, and are you fading anybody here?
Well, yeah, I'm going to be all over the 49ers. I wish the spread was at 7 instead of 8.5.
Yeah.
I think that would be a lot easier of a bet, but I'm still going to be on the 49ers. Guy I'm going to be avoiding is Van Jefferson for the Rams. I think we all expected him to kind of step up and be that #1 option with Cooper Kupp injured. We saw it last year that he didn't really step up into that much of a dominant role, and now we're seeing this again with him with the other wide receivers in Atwell and Nakua step up. So I'm going to be avoiding Jefferson.
I agree with you here. I think the 49ers win. I still think they cover despite that big line. I'll go with the over as well. Rams could get some garbage points there as 49ers get a big lead. And I'm avoiding a different Rams receiver. It's Tutu Atwell. So really good in the opener. 6 catches, 119 yards. Tougher matchup, though. 49ers do not allow the deep ball, and that's what Atwell excels at. He's the top deep threat. I think Nakua is going to get a lot of work over the middle once again and have another good showing. I'm just avoiding Atwell. I just don't think it's a good matchup for him here. And we actually have a Rams question in the chat too. Should I trade Nakua and Kelly for Godwin and McKinnon.
Hmm.
What do you think? I
I mean,
mean,
it's tough because McKinnon doesn't really show much value
yeah.
after week 1 with that. I do like Kelly, though, just because of Eckler kind of being a little bit banged up. We saw that he's kind of questionable with that, and he looked good in week 1. So I think he's going to be that dominant role. If Eckler does go down, I think he'll be a top 15 back that you have to have in your lineup. But Godwin is the best player, I would say, value-wise in that trade.
Yeah, I agree. I think Godwin does have the most value out of all those guys. I'm not giving up on him after a week. It is just a half PPR though, so that kind of changes things a little bit because Nakua and Godwin both probably going to be reception guys in their offenses. Kelly too, I definitely think he has more value. And if you own Eckler, I would definitely do that trade because I think it just makes a lot of sense to have Eckler and Kelly on your roster. I do like Nakua. I worry about him when Cup returns though. I almost would sit tight with Godwin and McKinnon. I'm not totally sold on Nakua, but if you have Eckler, I definitely would do the trade to get Kelly on my roster. Don't have much time left. Let's go. We only have a couple games left though, so that's good. Let's hit some of the good games here left. How about Dolphins Patriots? I think this could be a good game here. The line on that is 46.5 over under. Patriots are actually +3 at home. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think I'm going with Miami. I think Miami looked just really good. That offense was clicking. Tua looked good. Tyreek Hill looked as one of the best wide receivers in the game and top fantasy production. A guy I'm going to be avoiding is Juju. Juju, he had all the opportunity last year to kind of dominate in Kansas City's wide receiver room. Didn't take advantage of that. And he could barely even start for fantasy leagues, and we're kind of seeing the same thing this year after week 1 with the Patriots with him. He should be that number 1 option, but he hasn't shown that.
Yep, I agree. I agree with you. I do not like Juju. I like the Dolphins to win on the road too. You never know with the Patriots; they're always ready to play. Belichick does a great job, especially defensively, scheming things up. But I still think the Dolphins are too good. They're not going to be able to score enough. The Patriots to win here, and I'm avoiding uh, Ezekiel Elliott in this matchup. I think he's going to be a touchdown dependent player. He played just 35% of the snaps last week. He's going to be a tough play for me, even though he had 12 touches in his limited time. He had 5 catches last week, but managed just 14 yards. I don't see him getting that much work as a receiver going forward. So I definitely think that I would avoid Elliott in this matchup. So the Nakua owner says he has Nakua and he's a Kelly guy, and he wants are Godwin and McKinnon. All right, I got you. Anything change for you there before we get out of here?
No, no, not really. Want to go one more game?
Yeah, let's go one more game. All right,
Yeah, let's go
Saints
Saints,
Panthers because I
Saints
teased it.
Panthers.
Saint Panthers, that's one of those Monday night games. It is Saints 40 for the over under, really low scoring game, +3 for the Panthers. So they are favored. The Saints are favored on the road here. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I like Carolina in this matchup, surprisingly, at the +3. I do think the Saints could win this game, but that 3-point edge definitely entices me. A player I'm going to be avoiding that was actually started in a lot of our RT sports leagues was Taysom Hill. He has that tight end eligibility. So he only had 3 rushes in week 1 and had 1 target. Um, a lot of people are just starting him in case that he gets that goal line carry or goes in at quarterback with an injury. So it's definitely a guy to keep an eye on, but I'm going to be avoiding him this
Yep.
week.
I like the Saints to win on the road. I like them to cover. I'll go with the over as well. And I don't like Michael Thomas like I teased. He was healthy and playing, but still, he had just 5 catches, 61 yards. Didn't show me a lot of breakaway ability there. Panthers allowed the fewest fantasy points for receivers in week 1 as well. And we confused the Nakua owner. So my thoughts were if you have Kelly, I would keep if you have Eckler, keep Kelly on your roster. But if you don't have Kelly, I'm okay with trading for Godwin and McKinnon because I think Godwin will be better than Nakua when Cup is back and healthy. Hope that clears things up for you. All right, Logan, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate everybody watching out there as well. It's been a lot of fun talking with you, getting people ready for week 2 of the fantasy football season. Good luck in all your games. And Logan, thanks again for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
All right, good luck, everybody, and and have a great week 2. Hope you win all your games. This has been Jeff Paur for Real Time Fantasy Sports. Have a great day.